First, I'd like to know, when did you start making film, movie?
Ooh, starting there, huh? Do you want me to look at camera or you? Or
Either way.
either you? Okay. When did I start making films?
Yeah.
I started when I was 13 years old. I was born in Hangzhou and I moved to Hawaii. And then I moved to New Jersey. And in Jersey, there's absolutely nothing to do. So I developed, there was this camera that we used for shooting, vacations and stuff. And me and my friends would just shoot films every day after class. I was very shy in high school. I don't think I made anyone laugh. I don't think I made anyone feel much of anything. And the only way I did that was through these stupid shorts that I made. So it was addicting, and it became a form of therapy for me. For example, in the U.S. we have SATs, standardized tests. My parents put me through 3 years of training to do these SAT tests. And it was so traumatizing, I made a film about it, and and it helped me through it. Same thing, college applications, it got me through it. So it was very much a form of therapy because I couldn't afford therapy as a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
So it really much started from a point of love, and I made a decision to not complete university. I went to a one-year film school program. I wanted to force myself into this path. Your Chinese parents, and I'm sure parents in general, always say, have a backup plan. And my motto was, if I have a backup plan, then you'll never be able to do what you're set out to do, because
Yes.
you don't want to have something to fall back to. So to be honest, if this film thing doesn't work out, I don't know what I'm going to do. There's nothing else I can do at this point.
And when did the film idea come up?
So for 3 years, I actually shot these real natural disaster documentaries. I went to places like Honduras, even Brazil, Taiwan, a lot of Central America to capture these disaster events. And it was very interesting. I made a discovery because when I got there, the first thing I would really ask them is, how do you feel, right? And they just lost their house. They, when it got flooded or burned down, and they can't find their family, and they would immediately cry. It's the end of the world for them at that moment. And then, 1 year later, when you revisit these people, you ask them the same question, like, how do you feel now? And almost everyone that I spoke with, they are very thankful for the disaster, because it brought their family closer, it brought their friends, have more understanding with their friends, the community closer.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting because it's this light in this darkness, there's something very bad that was actually a force of good. A very specific anecdote was these two neighbors in Hurricane Katrina. They lived next to each other for many, many years, and they never spoke a single word. One of their houses was destroyed, the other was not. And she welcomed him into the house and said, you can live with me until you get up on your feet. And months later, they become best friends, And it's highly ironic, there can be someone living right next door to you who become your best friend, and who knows, maybe your lover, but you have to wait for the end of the world to come before you can say hello. I found that to be a very ironic and interesting premise.
泡面、咖啡、氧气。
I finished my disaster relief documentary job around 2014, 2015, and that's where the concept of it originated. I wanted to make a film, basically an anti-disaster relief film, where the disaster is actually a force of good. And I used this very famous thought experiment, actually originated by Einstein. So Einstein's theory of relativity came out of this thought experiment of what would happen if the sun disappeared. So I combined these two, this very hard science fiction element with this very real life experience I had with natural disasters. Yeah. And I turned it into this thing called Last Sunrise. We didn't have the budget to find any stars, so we chose to find people who were more suitable for the characters. And that was a long process, maybe a couple months. Finding locations was also a couple months. And everything happened simultaneously. There was no step-by-step because we wanted to shoot before the Chinese New Year's of 2018. Yeah. So there were only a couple months for everything to happen, including finishing the screenplay and everything. So we got greenlit from probably around October 2017, and then it was a sprint in terms of all departments until February of 2018, when we began to make the film, and we wrapped in 14 days.
一周内，全球气温将下降到-18度，1年后达到-73度，氧气会慢慢稀薄，所有有机生命都将陆续衰竭，地球变成冰冻世界。
One of the difficult things about Last Sunrise is that it's actually saying a lot of things.
Yeah.
And this could be a pro and con, I guess, depending on the viewer. But for me, I'm very much about genre mashing. So this is very much a science fiction drama / romance film. So in terms of the science fiction element, there's definitely a very much climate change message there. I think what I'm actually really trying to say is it's not enough just to develop one source of energy. Forget about fossil fuels. I mean, eventually we're going to run out of fossil fuels. I'm just worried that we won't run out of it quickly enough.
Yeah.
But even without fossil fuels, we can't just focus on developing one source of energy. I think the safest bet is, don't put all your eggs in one basket. There's a saying, right? Is to develop everything. Depending on your country, where you're from, there's definitely a source of renewable energy that would work for you. In the US, both wind and solar is a really good bet. Parts in Europe, I believe in Iceland, geothermal wouldn't be, I think it already is like 90% or, don't quote me on that, but a very majority of the country gets their energy from that. So I think the safe bet is to definitely 100% renewable energy, but also tap into all forms. So that would be more of the science fiction element. There's a message there for climate change. Now there's a message more about the heart, more about a humane message, which is that, again, from my experience with shooting natural disaster documentaries, there's a very big irony there where a lot of times we go through life and we hit an event that feels like our end of the world. And this could be something, this could be a relationship, this could be a very literal natural disaster, this could be some kind of a family event. And when we face this end of the world, some of us might decide to give up, some of us might decide that, okay, I'm never gonna get out of this hole. But from my experience, at least, with shooting natural disaster and also myself, the fact that this film exists is that within the darkest nights, that's when the light shines brightest. And it sounds super cliche and gross, and I get chills saying that, but I believe that's very much true. And I take that to a very literal sense with this film by making the sun disappear. It's a very literal sense of in this darkness where the sun's gone, if we wait long enough and if we hold hope long enough, there will be another sun maybe, and maybe not one, maybe not two, maybe more, so I'm taking this kind of metaphor and making it in a very literal sense, is that we can't give in to the darkness. We have to await the light. We have to hope for the light, and it will come.
Are you already planning a next project or something?
So I have a place in Los Angeles. But 4 years ago, I went on a vacation to China for it was a 1-month vacation, and 4 years later, I never left. So I'm back and forth between China and Los Angeles. They both seem to be very busy places for film, but China definitely, there are more opportunities just because it's growing very exponentially. And 2019 specifically is considered this era of Chinese sci-fi. So as this, science fiction lover, I think it'll be very interesting to explore more of what Chinese science fiction could be. So while in China for 4 years, I wrote 4 screenplays.
Oh, wow.
All of them is a genre mixing of science fiction with romance, with drama, with a social message. And these 4 screenplays, I don't know which one's going to be next, because each one's harder than the next, each one's more difficult than the next one. But very much I am looking forward to making the next one. I hope, as a Chinese American, I hope making a genre mix of science fiction and something else can bring the world closer. And because in China, the market is so big and there were so many people that a lot of times that we don't really worry about the international markets. Because, for example, Wandering Earth is a science fiction, a very big science fiction film. It's incredible, it's great, it's got incredible VFX that gives Hollywood the run for its money, but also it's also more focused on the domestic market, as it should be. But I think the next step is that, and something I would love to have a small voice in is to make maybe not huge budget films, but also small and mid-budget films that can welcome not just China, but the whole world internationally. And we can, and science fiction is the perfect vehicle to drive this home and to bring the world a little bit closer. Because going back to whether the sun's going to disappear, or global warming, climate change, we can't solve any of these problems alone. We have to all work together as one. And as a Chinese American, I grew up in New Jersey, watching, of course, all the Hollywood films, and at home I would see these, Chinese wuxia dramas and romantic dramas. And so I'm very much kind of this weird mix of these different cultures. And it's interesting because now that China's rising up, soon to be the biggest film market, you have a lot of people trying to make what's called co-productions, which is trying to make, like you said, you hire Hollywood stars, you mix stars from different countries, and you hope that it kind of works. But the problem is that co-productions, and why it's failing right now, or it's not doing as well as it should be, is that it's a very producer-centric point. They're trying to make more money, and you're trying to tap into more markets, and that's why you're doing it. It's not coming from the writer, from the director, from the core of the story. So my challenge to myself, and with the 4 screenplays that I've written, is there a way to write a story where you can benefit from having an international cast, an international setting? If you can do that, then you can kind of get the best of both worlds. I call it this Goldilocks zone, this zone where you can have this very real benefit from both markets, and not just monetary-wise, but also story-wise. Because then I really believe the next generation, or the next stories that we need to tell, starting from Crazy Rich Asians, Black Panther, is to let's take some Hollywood tropes and let's tell it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of potential there that hasn't been tapped into. So as a Chinese American writer-director, I hope that in the future we can make co-productions not only for the reason to make more money, although that's a very good reason, but also to tell more interesting stories.
And how low was the budget?
Am I allowed to say? Yeah, okay. So our financiers is Alibaba/Youku. So it's very much of an equivalent of like a kind of a YouTube/Netflix, right? So it's an online platform. And because it's science fiction, they were very worried about making their money back. Because keep in mind, we made this film over a year ago, and at that point, there is no Chinese science fiction. So we were given only 250,000 US dollars to pull off, again, this science fiction road trip film, which is why we only had 14 days. And in fact, our whole VFX budget was really done by one person.
Wow.
Because of these limitations. And it's a very good friend of mine, obviously.
Really good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
The film was done with a lot of gut, a lot of love, Like I can feel that you love making movies.
As a director, I always believe that, at least in terms of independent filmmaking, 90% of the stuff you have to do is the stuff you don't want to do to be able to fulfill that 10% of what you love. I mean, for this film, I personally, along with my co-producer Ellie, we personally did all the film festival submissions. I personally did the subs because no one else were able to do the subs. I ended up doing the editing. I ended up doing a lot of things that honestly I don't want to do. But you know what? You're gonna have to do it if you want the film to make the film that you want to make.
And what was the hardest scene to make?
That's a great question. One of my favorite scenes, if you guys ever get to see this film, is it's in the trailer where the 2 people are standing along this really giant hill after the guy's leg gets hurt. Mainly because it was the most painful day of the shoot. That was the day when we were all outside, middle of nowhere, in negative 26 Celsius. We were freezing and we were eating the ramen. They were eating the ramen scene and they were talking. It's the first time they kind of connected after all this up and downs, and they look up and you see this shot of the Milky Way. That was my favorite sequence, mainly because I think that was, story-wise, that was the first time they kind of came together before very quickly being forced apart again. And also in terms of production, where the reason it was so good is they were freezing their ass off. They were not acting. They were suffering, and they were trying to enjoy this really disgusting ramen that the production design team forgot to put like the powder in. So it was just like, it was just gross, like without taste ramen, and they were eating it, and they loved it because it was so cold, and it was, at least that was hot, and it was just real. You know, it was absolutely real, and I'll never forget that day.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.